Arcades are a lot of fun because there are so many games and things to do and play. We've all enjoyed arcades at some point in our lives. I'm not sure about you, but I still enjoy going to the arcade. But who knew arcades were capable of holding so much creepiness? Who says we only get the creeps from abandoned places? Grab a blanket and a drink as we explore 3 very creepy true arcade horror stories. I worked at an arcade about 3 months ago. I was working a normal Saturday shift from 5 p.m. to midnight when we closed. It was usually pretty busy for most of the shift until about 10 or 11 p.m. when things would get pretty quiet. This day was no different. I stayed pretty busy working the concessions for a while. Then I switched to cleaning, where I was walking around sweeping and disinfecting machines that weren't in use. The arcade contained a large game section, a small bowling alley, and a laser tag area in the back. Our laser tag was currently not in use because we were making some minor improvements to it. It was only going to be out for about a week because it was a very popular game with the customers. I went around sweeping and cleaning in less crowded areas. At around 9 p.m., I saw a man by the laser tag area. He was just looking around and then he walked right into the doorway, which was supposed to be locked. I went over there to tell the man that he couldn't be back there. I walked into the room, which was pretty dark. I stood in the doorway and told him that the laser tag was closed and that he needed to go, but there was no reaction. I stepped farther in and searched about, but he was nowhere to be seen. If you enjoy spooky horror stories like this, don't forget to hit the like button so that we can come up with more of these. I turned on all the lights I could find, but it was still pretty dark in there. Everywhere I went, I couldn't find the man. Eventually, after about 5 to 10 minutes of being in there, I figured he must have left and I went back out. I went back to work and it actually went by pretty fast. Finally, 11 o'clock came around and everything was pretty quiet. I only had an hour left, so I cleaned some more and then started to put things away. Many of my coworkers left, and by the time midnight arrived, it was just me and Amanda, who was the manager. I went around the arcade for one last sweep of the floors, but when I got to the corner where the laser tag was, I froze because I saw the man from before peeking out of the room with an angry look on his face. I wasn't sure what to do because I knew he had seen me. I decided to simply inform him in a strong voice that we were closed and he needed to go right away. But instead, he ducked back into the laser tag area. I went back to tell Amanda, and when I told her, she said she would come with me to talk to the man. We arrived at the laser tag area and went inside again, and this time, he was nowhere to be found. We looked everywhere this time for about 30 minutes after the laser tag area, and we searched the entire building, but he was nowhere to be found. I don't know who that man was, but we never saw him again. I remember going to our state fair with my parents about 5 years ago when I was a little younger. There were lots of attractions at the fair, but my favorite back then had to be the rides in the arcade. I remember they had this huge arcade at the back corner of the fairgrounds, and it had all the arcade games you would expect. One day, when we were at the fair, I remember stopping by the arcade earlier in the day, and then we went back late at night right before we left. On our way back, my dad noticed something cool across the street from the arcade, so I stepped inside. By this time, it was late, and no one else was in the arcade at all. I went to my favorite game, which was the one where you shoot basketballs and see how many points you could get in a minute. I played a few rounds of that and then decided to see if my parents were ready to leave yet. But as soon as I turned out, the machine behind me began to make a lot of noise. It was a game with a screen similar to Pac-Man, but I had never heard of it before. The lights on the machine were flashing and all the sound effects were on. When I got in there, it didn't seem to be on, so I looked at the screen, which was blank, and out of nowhere, it switched on. It began off as the game screen, but then the text changed. Suddenly, it began to flash random words. I had no idea what was going on, so I immediately raced out of the arcade as soon as I could back to my parents. I'm not sure if it was a malfunction, a prank or what, but I know it scared me that day, and I still feel scared thinking about it. Last year, I was at a mall near where I live doing some shopping, and it was in the morning not long after the mall had opened. In fact, there weren't too many people there yet at all, which was nice because I could get my shopping done faster and easier. I wasn't in a hurry and I stopped to get a coffee and then walked through the halls to locate the first store I was going to. As I strolled down one of the corridors, I spotted a new addition to the mall, an arcade, which had taken the place of one of the older stores that had closed. It seemed fairly cool. I used to love going to arcades as a kid, and I walked inside just to check it out. There were no employees inside. It was very modern and just like a giant room with sort of dim lighting and neon lights here and there. There was dark-colored carpet as well, and every place to get tokens or prizes was done through like an electronic vending machine. Nobody else was in there at the time, which was not surprising given the malls being new. While I checked out some of the games and stuff, I walked all the way to the end of the arcade when something caught my eye. There was this guy who appeared to be laying on the ground, hiding between a machine in the wall. It would have been really hard to see the guy if I wasn't in that exact spot. I noticed then that his entire face was painted, and it was painted to look like a clown. He got up and they just walked out rather quickly, which I thought was extremely strange, but then I moved on. I did some shopping in the other stores, and when I was probably in the second or third store for the day, I noticed the clown guy again. He was walking behind me, seemingly staring at me as he did. Not long after he left and walked away, only to appear again about 30 minutes later. As I walked through one of the mall hallways to leave, he was walking behind me about 30 feet back. Was he following me for some reason, and why was his face painted like a clown? Anyway, this guy seemed unusual in general. I exited the mall and walked out to the parking garage where my car was. The guy behind me did the same, and I noticed him growing faster behind me. Soon, I could hear him running, and I turned around to see him sprinting straight towards me. I froze. I didn't know what to do, but when the man got within tenfold of me, he suddenly veered off and ran away from me, laughing an insane and creepy sounding laugh. As he did that, I was beyond weirded out. I got into my car and left. Whoever that guy was, he must have been insane or something. And that's all we've got for you today. Have you ever been in a position like this before? What are your thoughts on arcades? Which one made you feel the creeps creeping through? Let us know in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you don't miss out any of our fun story times.